No wonder your holistic case has been getting these rave reviews and engagements from leading experts in the field, as well as several noted public intellectuals. Jordan Peterson, for instance, took to Twitter a couple of months back, praising the book as difficult, densely informative, and well written. He quotes a particular excerpt from the book: "Without functional criteria to guide a search through the vast space of possible sequences, random variation is probabilistically doomed." He followed up with another tweet, another question: "Is this an accurate claim?" He makes the case very carefully. "It's not often that I encounter a book that contains so much that I did not know." He seems to be very intrigued by the case for intelligent design's explanatory advantage over random mutations to explain the origin of genetic information. Could you summarize the case here, what Peterson is exactly referring to, and also probably evaluate the alternate evolutionary mechanisms out there to account for the same?
Right. That's a technical portion of all three books. I address this question of the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism with respect to the need to produce new information. Let me give a quick analogy that will clarify the nature of the problem, and then maybe we'll dive a little deeper into it. We now know that DNA contains information in a digital form. That uses a 4-character alphabet or set of characters to convey information. This was Francis Crick's famous sequence hypothesis in 1958. Watson and Crick elucidated the double helix structure of the molecule in 53. In 58, Crick, working on his own, suggests that the 4 chemical subunits that run along the interior of the molecule, called bases or nucleotide bases, are functioning like alphabetic characters in written text, or like the zeros and ones in a section of software code. His hypothesis is eventually confirmed. It took about 7 or 8 years of intense work in a period we call the molecular biological revolution. But by 1965, molecular biologists had elucidated what they call the gene expression system, or the system for protein synthesis. And they realized that, in fact, the sequence of bases on the DNA, on the spine of the DNA molecule, were providing information for directing the construction of proteins and protein machines inside the cell. So you had digital information directing the construction of mechanical systems. Very similar to our modern CAD/CAM technology that we use in manufacturing today. So that raised a huge question, which is, where does all that information come from? And if you think about what mutation and selection do, natural selection works after the fact of a successful random search for a new variation, okay? So the creative part of the mutation selection mechanism is the random part. It's not natural selection. Natural selection is simply a sifting mechanism. But finding the new code to build a new protein has to occur first by random mutation. Now, if the number of possibilities that need to be searched is large compared to the number of possibilities which will produce a functional alternative, then that mechanism may be doomed probabilistically. It may not. Will not. There will not be enough time to search the haystack in search for the needle. The haystack's too big and the needle tucked away in too small a corner of it, then the odds are you're going to fail rather than succeed. And what has been shown mathematically by molecular biologists who worked on this question, the technical name for it is the issue of the rarity of genes and proteins in sequence space. How rare are functional genes, functional sequences, in relation to all the gibberish sequences? If the overwhelming majority of sequences are gibberish, then probabilistically a random search is going to hit one of those and not find the thing you want. So here's the easy to understand analogy. If we have a section of computer code and we start randomly changing the zeros and ones, will we be more likely, will that computer code be more likely to degrade the function that's there and destroy it, or find a new functional program or algorithm? Well, when I ask that question rhetorically to computer programmers, they laugh because they know that after very few changes, the code might tolerate a few random changes, but after very few, you're going to destroy any function long before you get to a new program or operating system. And now the same thing has been shown experimentally in the case of gene sequences. If you start to change them randomly, between 3 and 15 mutations are sufficient to make to degrade the resulting protein into a state of instability, thermodynamic instability. And so we know empirically that the mutation selection mechanism is therefore not an effective means of generating new genetic information, not even enough genetic information to build one new functional protein. Mathematically, the reason for that is there are so many more ways to go wrong than there are to go right. And one molecular biologist who's worked on this, Douglas Axe, who did 14 years of research on this at Cambridge University, found that the ratio of the functional sequences to non-functional sequences in even a short, relatively modest length protein is 1 over 10 to the 77th power. So there's only 10 to the 65th atoms in the Milky Way galaxy. You quickly get a sense that a random search is going to be probabilistically doomed to find a non-functional sequence, not a functional one, even taking into account the 4 billion years of biological history on planet Earth. The precise way of saying this is that it's overwhelmingly more likely that a random search, even supplemented with natural selection, will fail in finding one new gene or protein in the known time of life on planet Earth than it is that such a search would succeed. So the failure is overwhelmingly more probable than success, in which case positing such a mechanism as the explanation for the origin of information is overwhelmingly more likely to be false than true. And we want best explanations in science, not ones that are more likely to be false than true, certainly not overwhelmingly more likely. So I spell out this very careful probabilistic, it's a kind of second order probabilistic reasoning, and it's spelled out very carefully in both Signature in the Cell and Darwin's Doubt, my first 2 books. And then I reprise that in shorter form in Return to the God Hypothesis and address various objections that have been offered and show those to be inadequate as well. In fact, what I'm able to do in the new book is cite some of this new work by an Israeli protein scientist, Dan Tofik, who showed that if you start randomly changing sections of a gene, you will degrade the resulting protein between 3 and 15 mutations. And that's not nearly enough to generate a whole new protein. So you're going to degrade function long before you find new function.
Just out of
So
curiosity,
bad mechanism, doesn't have the creative power to generate new information. That's the bottom line. Mutation and selection.
So out of curiosity, did you get a chance to probably discuss this with Peterson himself, or are you aware of the?
We did have a short exchange on his Twitter when this came out, because he asked if anyone, he asked his followers, is Meyer correct about this problem of rarity of genes and proteins in sequence space and the difficulty of a random search? And a couple of people made very facile responses saying, oh, no, he doesn't know anything. This is completely wrong, but didn't really offer much of an explanation. So I then, in 250 characters, tweeted a tight summation of the argument. And so, you know, we'll see. I haven't had any further opportunity to discuss, but we were obviously encouraged since Jordan has such a following and he's such a thoughtful person.